One of the hardest parts about being a creator is having to do everything yourself. Selling things, writing newsletters, navigating the constant changes on social media. It is not easy, and it can leave you with little time to focus on branding the very business you're working to create. But you don't have to do it alone. DiffWorks specializes in a range of creative solutions, including commercial services like audio and video production, photography, and a full suite of design services like logo and brand development, website design, marketing assets, social media content, and much more. So let DiffWorks be your creative ally in taking your business to the next level. Book a consultation today at staydiff.com. I'm Kahja Elliott, and I'm a food enthusiast. Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming. And I talk to people about how they create community through food in the Bay and beyond. Welcome to the As Told By podcast. All right, welcome back to this week's episode of the As Told By podcast. Again, I'm still here on location in Chicago. Now, I'm not actually here by the time you're listening to this, but in real time as I'm recording, I'm still here in Chicago and doing my second of two interviews here. So with a career that started in the world of fine dining, but a heart that has always been in barbecue, I'm talking to a South Side Chicago native whose culinary journey began in his grandmother's kitchen and has gone on to earn his place in Chicago's fine dining scene. He's led the team at Moto under the late visionary chef Homaro Cantu during the time they received their Michelin star. And next, with Feast and Imbibe, a fine dining catering company launched with his wife Heather, with whom he now owns, where we're sitting today, Soul and Smoke, in the tradition of Chicago barbecue, honoring the nostalgic communal spirit of the craft. Welcome, Chef D'Andre Carter, to the As Told By podcast.
Whoa, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now, you might not remember, but I do. We met very briefly last year at the James Beard Awards. It was after those panel discussions, and people were serving like little stations of food upstairs, and you served me some really good brisket.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's what we're known for.
Yes.
Our brisket is, it's been said, some of the best brisket in the Midwest by the Chicago Tribune. Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad that you got a chance to enjoy it.
Yes, I remembered it a whole year later. It was that good.
Well, thank you.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Yes, yes. So in my research on you, and y'all, I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit more about the environment we're in because it's so beautiful. But if you hear some voices in the background, we're in an open environment. But like so many people I talk to on this podcast, a lot of your experience starts back with your family and your grandmother.
Yeah.
Grandmothers be getting it.
Yeah, the grandmothers be getting it. I was just watching I was at the Edna Lewis viewing session yesterday, and Chef Rome and one of the chefs, another Chicago chefs, and they was just pretty much saying like a similar story to mine. It's just like really all start with the grandmother, you know? And I think that's because, so my mom had me really young. Mm-hmm. You know, my mom had me at 16 years old. Okay. I'm my grandmother's first grandchild out of 11 grandchildren. So I spent a bunch of time like over my grandmother's house. She actually delivered me from my mom.
Oh, wow.
So, she was a nurse at the hospital, and she helped give birth to me. So I always been like the favorite. So, kind of like cooking just kind of came natural. I didn't grow up saying I was going to be a chef. I loved to be around my grandmother, and I loved to be around her when she was cooking and making desserts. And my favorite part was when she's barbecuing in the backyard. Because she had 7 children. I feel like it was always a celebration, and that's the way we celebrated. My grandmother would go out in the backyard and fire up that grill, and we'd get some ribs going, some chicken, burgers, and I was right there next to her the whole way.
Okay, now wait. There's part of what you said there that I wasn't expecting, because normally when we talk about like people who got inspiration cooking from their grandmother, she's in the kitchen, getting it going, frying, cooking, all those things. But you said she was outside grilling.
She was outside grilling.
Okay.
My grandmother loved to grill. I would I don't know, I just had like these vivid memories, just like spending the weekend over my grandmother's house, and they'll get the Al Green going. They'll have their drinks in the back, and you'll smell that Kingford charcoal getting lit up, and yeah, man. And then that's part of my childhood. That's part of growing up.
Nice. Okay. It's a high bar. I'm a new grandmother.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She will be 3 on September the 1st. So I can't believe this is the standard I got to live up to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but so these times is like I feel like times are like changing right now. I think I'm 40 plus. A lot of people that grew up in the 90s, 70s, probably like early 2000s. It was a lot of family tradition with like cooking together, celebrating together. It's probably still going on. I'm probably just not aware as much, but I feel like it was more in your face. Because my backyard wasn't the only one lit up. It was a bunch of other backyards. And their grandparents would do the same thing. Barbecue just was just part of celebration.
Very much so. Anytime a grill is going, people usually are looking pretty celebratory. I know I am.
Yeah.
I'm a new griller, so I don't, I'm learning. So maybe right now I'm on practice and we'll get to celebration in good time. I mentioned in the intro that you started at Moto, or that was one of the places where you got your start. And I didn't know anything about that restaurant, so I looked it up. And it was described as a molecular gastronomy restaurant. Now, I think I know what that means, but you help walk us through. For those of us that don't know, what does that mean?
All right, the molecular gastronomy is the mixture between science and food. But what drew me to Moto was the presentation of, what food can be. I never saw food with lasers. I never saw somebody read the menu, then eat it.
What?
I never saw liquid nitrogen and, all type of like crazy, herb twisted utensils. So this was about, so I graduated culinary school in 2007. So I did my internship at Moda at 2008. But during that time of trying to find out where I was going to do my internship at, in that time, French cuisine was the leading cuisine. So I knew I wanted to cook because every time I was in the kitchen, it never felt like work. I think for me, I fell in love with the adrenaline first, and then I just wanted to be good at it. I really wanted to be good. So I was like, okay, I was working at the Olive Garden then, But, that's what kind of, I enjoyed hanging out with my grandmother. I enjoyed the rush, the adrenaline, and then now it's like, I'm getting older. It's time to take life serious out of all the jobs you had. What would be a job that you want to make a career out of? And I was like, yeah, I want to be a chef. So I signed up for Le Cordon Bleu. Fast forward, I did my internship at Moto, and I thought it was the coolest thing I ever saw. Actually, while I was looking for an intern, it was between like going to like Disney, out in Miami. I was young still, so I was like, yeah, I want to go to Miami. I want to go on a cruise. And then there was a couple other like French restaurant options. And then I just kind of like strolled through YouTube, and I saw a chef like doing fun things like with a laser. I saw like the edible cigar. I saw like the roadkill dish. The plating was, distracted. It was very like art. It was very like artish, and I was like, what? And then I was like, where's this place at? This place is in Chicago, and I was like, oh, I gotta go work there. So I reached out, sent the email to Chef Chris Jones, and he called me in for a stage, and it was like it was like being in YouTube, it was like being in the TV. I never like seen that like such of a serious setting, with so many chefs that was really just dialed in on what they was doing, and I'm seeing like all these moving parts happen. I was like, man, I hope they pick me. I hope they pick me. I hope they pick me. And and it was like, that first day of the stage, I wasn't the first, the only one there. At that time, you had so many people staging and be working at these fine dining restaurants. I think it was about like 6 of us.
Okay.
By the end, it was like 3, and then I ended up getting selected as an intern. And my intern, experience was, I was making a transition, from something I really, just passionately loved doing, to something that was now being done for work, So now it's not like fun and games. It's not like you can't, mess something up and it's like, okay, no, you need to make that, you need to fix it. It's like correction. It's, it's about, just self-responsibility. And that's where I learned a lot, like in the fine dining scene. Like, you're responsible for a lot. And yeah, man, you got to like man up to stuff. And, the only people that's really making it is the people that really want to be good. And at that time, I thought we was one of the best culinary teams, like in Chicago. I felt like I was part of one of the best culinary teams in Chicago.
It sounds like it. You called off a lot of things in the name of molecular gastronomy. Is that a restaurant that's still operating?
No, unfortunately, my chef passed away and the restaurant closed.
Okay, so it closed. I did read that he passed, but the restaurant ended with that.
Yes, restaurant ended with that. And that type of cuisine, it was, you had Grant Atkins here at Alinea, doing things like that. You had Graham Elliott at Graham Elliott's, doing things like that.
Sounds like Esme too.
Yeah, Esme.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Esme, he came from like, Alinea, so that's part of his pedigree. But yeah, it was restaurants all across, the world that was really pushing the envelope to what food can be.
Yeah.
And as we talk, I'll let you know how that translates into what I'm doing today with barbecue.
Okay. Look, I want to hear all about it because I did stop by here yesterday. I just got in yesterday, and so I came by because I was hungry. I needed something to eat.
Yeah.
And so I came by and I got some barbecue, and, it also is a way just to help me inform the conversation that we were going to have today. I think this is probably the most aesthetically pleasing barbecue eatery I've ever been in. So when I walked back here, I'm like, oh, this is like an atrium. And that's what I told you all earlier when I said it's an open space. So imagine you have the river out back. People can go out there and boat. Yesterday was a really warm day, so people were out there boating. You have this whole outdoor area where you can sit. But then you have this whole area in here that's full of greenery and exposed brick and picnic-style seating and also table seating. And I'm like, okay, then. Walking in, I already was like, okay, I'm ready. And then I had the food. So I had a couple of things that I wanted to try. And not only was the meat really good, it was juicy, everything was smoky, I had sauce options, but the sides were good. And for me, like a barbecue restaurant is going to live and die on the sides. If the sides are good, you good. And I was so happy with what I had.
That's very important to me that I didn't really want to focus just on the meats. A lot of, barbecue places, the pit masters take pride. Like, they really take pride in the meat. Some of them, they might lack off on the sides because they really want to perfect, the right amount of smoke, the texture, the bark, all those details that come into like making something really good. But for me, I come from a fine dining background, and I come from like loving food. I really like love to make food. I really love to make food like taste good, and that's the direction that we was going. So we're a Southern inspired barbecue company that's based here in Chicago. We was founded in Evanston. During the pandemic, that's pretty much how we started to spread out. Right now, I have 4 locations, 2 food trucks, a retail line. And more things to come.
Don't go to, let's go back. You said you have, let's do the rundown. You got 2 food trucks.
Yes, 2 food trucks.
2 locations.
4 locations.
4 locations.
Yes.
Okay. Didn't I read that you have one in the stadium in Soldier
Yeah,
Field?
that's one of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we are growing. I like to describe us as one of the most popular, or the most popular barbecue restaurant here in Chicago. We're an independent restaurant group, that started from passion. I met Heather as an intern at Moto as well. So we was interns together, and we kind of like grew this company out. But with that being said, the growth really started, during the pandemic, because you mentioned in the intro that, when I finally did leave Moto, we started hosting these underground like dinners under my previous company, Feast and Imbibe, and that goal was always to have a restaurant. We was doing creative, familiar food that people can enjoy at big celebrations, weddings, corporate parties, birthday parties, and it was getting pretty popular here. We was on every list, that we wanted to be on, as far as every venue list, and it was going really good. But with those events, everything got to be planned out so far in advance that we did have a full calendar in 2020, but the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And that whole calendar went away. During the process of growing Feast and Imbibe, we also had Soul and Smoke. With Soul and Smoke was just a catering company. It was a catering company. It was available to the, if you know, you know. It's pretty much one of those things. It's kind of like a side thing food I can do, food I grew up eating that I can do with my eyes closed, So when the pandemic happened, all those events kind of like went away, and we had like all this staff. We had just bought our building in Evanston, and then we just didn't want to throw in the towel. So we partnered with Russ and Your Kitchen, the Evanston Community Foundation, and the Trotter Project to help feed people on the west and south side of Chicago. And that's when everybody was like, "This food is so good. Where have you guys been?" Yeah. And from there it just kind of exploded. During the pandemic we got our food truck because people wasn't coming out, so we wanted to bring the party to them. People was doing block parties, birthday parties. They were just trying to find some sense of living life,
community.
Yeah. So that leads to the place where we're at right now, Rockwell on the River. Once the pandemic started to die down, the food trucks started going to different breweries and, different locations around Chicago. And we used to do events up here in the food truck, and the owner had the food there, at one of our food truck events, and they asked us to move in. At that current time, we was in a ghost kitchen not too far from here, probably about 2 blocks away.
Okay.
So we moved our ghost kitchen staff in here. We opened up shop. We've been here for the last 3 years.
Yeah, look at that. That must have been some great food at the food trucks, and then be like, "How about you move in?"
Yeah.
Yes.
The food truck, man. The food truck. I got the food truck during the pandemic. I got the first food truck during the pandemic. I did not have no idea how busy that truck was going to be.
Wow.
That truck was going out every single day. That's why we ended up getting 2. Last summer, both of them was out every single day.
Wow.
And it was just like a crazy thing. But that's how Time Out Market, I wanted to mention that's how Time Out Market found us too. It was at the Logan Square Farmers Market. They came by, tried the food, and, they was blown away. And then once that article came out from the Chicago Tribune about rating us one of the best barbecue companies in the Midwest, we just pretty much exploded from there.
Wow. Well, I mean, the food speaks for itself. You know what I had yesterday that I was not expecting, and it was so good. In fact, I had the rest of it for breakfast this morning.
What's that?
That shrimp and grits was bomb.
Oh, man, that shrimp and grits is bomb. That's like one of my favorite.
Oh,
That's
man.
One of my favorite.
That was so good. I was not expecting that at all. And I'm a person, I'm like lukewarm with grits. I really don't fool with them for the most part, but every now and again I'll have like a shrimp and grits. But that one was really, really good. I loved the texture of the grits.
Yeah, the grits are special. Everything we do, it has a lot of thought behind it. From the shrimp and grits, from the gumbo, the house-made pastrami. With the shrimp and grits, we start with stone ground grits. We got a house-made chicken andouille bis. We got the Argentinian red shrimp. So the shrimp, you get like them soft lobster kind of like texture with the shrimp. And then you got the chicken andouille. Then you got like the rosemary stone ground grits underneath there to give it an extra savory touch on top.
It was good. I enjoyed it. Y'all did that. I saw that Soul and Smoke is an in-kind partner. Yeah. So y'all partner with In-Kind. I actually interviewed, I had a chance to go out to Austin last summer and interview Johan Munisinghe, who is, as you know, the CEO of In-Kind, and learn more. Because I had found out about them just as a customer. I'm in restaurants a lot, as you can imagine. And I was using it, and I would be talking to people about it, and I'm like, I want to go talk to them. And so I got to go out to Austin and learn so much more about them. And one of the things that Johan talked to me about in the interview was, contrary to what people might think, it's actually easier having more than one restaurant than just having one. Because having more than one means you had to employ systems to keep them running. Versus when you have one restaurant, you might not have all those systems because you're kind of there doing all the things. Did you find that to be true as you were expanding out to the multiple trucks and then multiple locations?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of growing pains. It wasn't easy. We did that in survival mode to, kind of like grow soul and smoke out. So, like, just being like an independent restaurateur, you learn a lot of things on the way. But one of the things that I did notice, by us being here in Chicago, and we pretty much got half the year to really make something here. Half the year is, cold, the other half year is warm, so we get really hard times, in the restaurant community, just being in Chicago in general. But what I did notice by us having multiple locations, if one is, not as performing as good, we always have another location that's really like picking up the slack, for the rest of the, business overall. And yeah, them systems, they come in play. I say like the systems itself really kicked in the growth status, the growth status of being just an entrepreneur. If you go back to the backstory, like, when we really left our jobs, when we really, got out on our own, how did that look? It looked like it was me, it was Heather, it was two of my former co-workers. They came in to help us out, and then, you get to that stage where, you hiring family and friends, and, sometimes that work out and sometimes it don't. But then, if you're fortunate enough to make it, to keep going, now you get to hire, professionals in the field. And when you hire your professionals in the field, they help make the systems, they help with the system. And the only way it's going to really work if you get like, if you have a nice system that you have to respect and you really have to, run the company behind.
Okay.
That's what I pretty much, noticed in my journey. When the systems pretty much kick in, because when the family and friends not there, and you just hire, you hiring professionals to, do payroll, to manage these different locations, also all sorts of things that have to come in the company. Yeah, that's when it's just straight. It's straight. It's no emotions. It's straight business.
It's business. And you learning on the fly, right? This
Yeah.
is not like, I came from a family of restaurateurs. I just know how this goes. You are having to learn and build this.
Yeah.
I hate that saying, build the plane as we fly it, but sometimes that's just what it is.
That's just what it is, yeah. And just to having that strive, just to, you want to be great. You want to remember. You want to set your mark here in Chicago. Ups, downs, family, built the family at the same time as growing this company. So, it's been a lot. We bought real estate. We switched, locations. Everything you pretty much can think of, we pretty much done it. In the food industry. I would like to tell a story like, Heather and I, we've been grinding so hard here in Chicago. We done farmers markets, we done pop-ups, we done undergrounds, we done weddings. We done ghost kitchens, we got food trucks, we done stadiums. All this stuff, to, really, shine light on our city.
You mentioned Heather is your wife.
Yes.
And has been with you through so much of this journey. First of all, y'all have the cutest kids.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
But she's been there with you. I recently interviewed someone who talked about how grateful they are to be an entrepreneur at a time that they are not simultaneously having to live a life with, dating and relationships. What's been the best part for you of building this business and building your family at the same time?
I say like the process. The reason, like the process, the journey. I love sharing the journey. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to me. Sometimes I step back and like, man, this is like crazy. Like what we done. We really built a life for our family. My daughter, both our kids. Well, my oldest daughter Max, she's 7 years old, and my youngest daughter, our youngest daughter Corey, she is 4 years old. And they grew up in a restaurant. Before they started going to school, we had a spot curved out, in the restaurant for the night. You can come by and they can watch, Corey and Max and Gray. Gray is Sarah's son, and she's been with us, pretty much throughout this whole journey. And it was important for us to, have the kids around while we worked. It's a special thing.
What do you hope they're picking up from this, from watching this family business take place?
In today's world, I would hope that they, understand, what it is to be successful, like the sacrifice, the hard work, the dedication, that it takes, to be successful. I hope they, watching their parents and they, seeing everything that we need, that we are trying to do to build a better life for them.
Yeah. Good for them. You think, are they displaying any interest in being, little pit masters? Are they like, oh, this food is good, thank you?
Yeah. So my oldest, so we cook breakfast every morning together. Max,
that.
Corey, and I. Yeah. So they just right now they're in their head. I want to be a chef. I want to be a chef, and that's one thing. I find great pride in it. My daughter Max, she loves making the eggs. Right now, she's just starting on the bacon, and Corey is like. She putting the food on the plate. So after Max would make it, Corey will like put the food on the plate, and they like scrambling and cracking the eggs and stuff like that. But yeah,
Got an operation going,
yeah,
y'all.
I got an operation going, and that's the thing. Oh, I wanted to so when people think of like barbecue, they think of like pit masters and focusing like on the meats. But I consider Soul and Smokers as a chef-driven barbecue restaurant, and we could talk more about that like as we go on into the interview, because we take more pride. Like you said, you love the sides. We making cornbread with fresh corn. We making, everything is scratch made.
Yes.
We smoking the chicken. I'm using local meats, local cheeses. It's just a whole nother out. It's a whole different outlook of the way I'm approaching this barbecue situation.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed that, yes, the sides were things that were familiar, but everything just seemed stepped up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The red beans and rice. The greens were amazing, especially that sauce, the sauce you have that's a vinegar-based barbecue sauce.
Yeah, the tangy sauce.
That was amazing with the
Yeah,
greens. Yes.
yeah.
That's going to be my breakfast tomorrow. I took a few things out of here.
You put it with the greens
Yes.
together? Oh,
Yeah,
man, I
because,
gotta try
people
that.
put like vinegar on
Yeah.
greens, and I'm like, okay, I tried it, and I'm like, okay, this is working.
Okay.
So I'm glad I put those together. But even like you said, the cornbread and the fun for me was kind of, as before I bit in, is this going to be sweet cornbread or savory? But it was like a nice mix of in between.
Yeah.
But it was good. Everything was good, and I can tell that y'all were putting a lot of effort into making sure that the experience was cohesive, and you're not just going to come here and have really good meat and maybe some okay coleslaw.
Okay.
That coleslaw was good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always surprised by the coleslaw coming because I want to make everything good, but that's like a sleeper in my mind that I get so many compliments on.
It was good. My grandmother used to make something similar. I want to say, like in the line of Waldorf salad. Hers had raisins and walnuts in it, and so what I had yesterday almost reminded me of that with apples and dried cranberries in it. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
I was a happy camper, very much so. You are also a graduate of the James Beard Foundation's Boot Camp for Policy and Change. And this was one of the things that I remembered most from my time here last year is it was my first time coming to James Beard last year. And I don't think I realized, in fact, I know I didn't, just how many like programmatic opportunities there were going on in the background. You just kind of know the awards and restaurants, but there were so many programmatic opportunities happening in the background. So talk to us a bit about what the boot camp was all about.
So the boot camp was about policy and change and training chefs for advocacy, things that really matters like in the community, in the neighborhood. Me being from the south side of Chicago, I really wanted to find a way to really like advocate, for people that look like me. So I joined the James Beard boot camp for policy and change, and that's a way. For me, like things like the SNAP program, like I grew up in a neighborhood where that is very beneficial to a lot of families, and for some parts of the government that's trying to like take that away, and with me having the voice that I have today, I just really want to just speak up and make sure that my success is helping the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. I can't remember the name of the restaurant right off the rip, but I want to say they were in New York, and it was a bakery. It's a black woman that owns it, and she had done something on social media recently talking about having to go through the rigorous process of getting EBT to be accepted at her bakery, because like some foods you can do hot foods, but not prepared things. Like they make it sometimes so specific. And I love that, programs like that exist, not just for people to be able to purchase food, but also to be able to have restaurant experiences. Because everyone deserves to be able to pull up in a place like this and have these experiences.
Yeah. So like the place, so my main location that is in Evanston, we have a community fridge out there. Like I mentioned before, when the pandemic happened, well, first, during the pandemic, we was feeding so many families, throughout the west side of Chicago, south side of Chicago, and I wanted to find a way to continue, feeding the community. So we set up a community fridge right outside the Evanston location where people can come and get like bread. We prepare fresh meals to put in there every day. It's a no questions asked. You just walk up to the fridge and you just get what you want. So just being able to just help people. I guess that's like my grandmother and me, because my grandmother, she helped everybody, and, she did what she can for people. And through my journey, I don't want to forget where I came from. So I really like to, push forward with that.
Yeah. I can tell in doing my research about you and about Soul and Smoke that social activism through food has been a big part of what you all are building here.
Yeah, it's a very huge part. It's been amazing. That's why I said the whole process, nothing. I wouldn't change anything. The struggling times, the good, the bad. Everything was meaningful. The whole process has been meaningful, and I hope that one day to pass it on to younger people, in my community, and also my kids. Have those conversations with them.
You're well on your way to doing that. Yeah. Well on your way. You mentioned, and I want to make sure that we do talk about this. You did graduate Le Cordon Bleu. Yeah. You are formally trained. Sometimes people regard barbecue as casual cuisine, and to some extent it is, right? But how are you making sure that those techniques find their way into what we're doing here? I know you talked about sourcing, but from the way you cook it, from your process for smoking, for your process for grilling, how are you making sure some of those same techniques make their way into what you're doing here now?
I live those techniques every day. Every day we roasting bones, we making stocks, we brining meats, we curing, we drying. We doing all those things with the mac and cheese, the French bechamels. But I really take pride in where I do source my products from. All the meat and all the cheeses, all the produce is mainly from the Midwest area.
Okay.
But yeah, just all those steps to making really good food is really important to me, and I'm really not cutting any corners like that. It started with the technique. Say for instance, I take the brisket for example. I'm sourcing the brisket from Midwest. We trimming it, we brining it, we seasoning it. I'm cooking it over, 2 types of hardwood, no gas, no electricity, just straight wood smoke.
Okay.
Then we take it out, we wrap it in butcher paper, we let it rest, and then we slice it. Same thing as our pastrami. It's a 3-week process to make that. And that's just one part of the menu. And then going into our new flagship restaurant in Evanston, that's going to have a separate dinner menu, sort of like a chef-driven menu, where we're going to have things like oysters, steak, seafood platters, fresh pasta. What else? Lamb chops, octopus. What is barbecue? Is it a type of meat? Is it a type of cut, or is it a technique? Is it grilling or is it smoking? What is barbecue? Is it grilled vegetable or is it smoked sauce? Can I consider that barbecue?
All right, so this is a very interesting. I love that you're bringing this up, though, because we do just make an immediate association when someone says barbecue, we're talking about meat, but it really is the cooking technique. It makes me think of a show that I used to watch and love, Man versus Fire on Cooking Channel with Roger Mooking. No, that wasn't the name of it. It was Man Fire Food. That's what it was called. I couldn't remember, but that's what the name of it was. Okay. And he would go to all these different places, but the common thread was the style of cooking over fire. Yes. Right? So it's, as you say, it's not just the meat, right? Sauce, people are doing grilled desserts. I've tried my hand. Now I have a very, basic barrel cast iron grill on my patio. I am in the beginning stages. I'm still using wood chips to try to create indirect heating, but I started doing desserts on the grill and just also like cooking in the cast iron pans, like making some of the sides instead of making them in the oven and then, having them with your grilled meat. Just do the whole thing on the grill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done smoked mac and cheese before. I did a salad where I
Yes.
smoked the water. I smoked the water for the barley. I cooked the barley and added it to a salad with strawberries and snap peas and stuff like that. Smoked barley, chopped salad. Grilled octopus. Smoked and grilled like lamb, goat, oysters. These are like different like techniques that you can describe. As barbecue.
Yes, I love it. I'm thinking about working my way up to a Traeger. I'm not there yet.
Okay.
Baby steps.
Okay.
Baby steps. But I know a few people that have it, and they're like, "Yeah, you just set it up through the app on your phone." And I'm just like, "Okay, that's
Yeah.
almost foolproof." Even I couldn't ruin that, but we'll see.
Yeah, it gets pretty easy. Like all the new technology out, they make barbecue pretty easy these days.
Yeah. All right. So I have a few fun questions for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
Ask a pitmaster.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Which is easier to run, a food truck or a brick and mortar?
It's kind of, I say definitely the food truck, but you got to build up. It's easier to execute an event with a food truck, because, the way we use our truck, we prepping everything in our commissary kitchen in Evanston, we smoke on all the meats, and then we into barbecue, so all this food can like hold really good and the customer can have a great experience. With the restaurant, it's so many moving parts. It's bigger, you need more staff, it's more mistakes that can happen. A food truck is kind of contained, everything is there. You need, 2 or 3 people most. You can serve 200 people, with 3 people. So things operate fairly easy and smooth. I could say like, with me just saying this right now, with the food trucks, you going into the day with a game plan. You go through a day with a game plan with a restaurant as well, but I just feel like it's just like much easier with a food truck.
Okay.
But it's hard. It's harder in Chicago because you can't park everywhere. It's like jumping through hoops to get licensing. But once you like get all that stuff out the way, you'll be good to go.
Okay. And it's cold.
Yeah.
After a certain time of
Yeah.
year, it's like, we're going to put this truck up.
Yeah, that's the only thing. Like, and then with the food truck, like, my first year with the food truck, I'm like, man, I got this food truck. I'm super excited. Wintertime roll around Chicago, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just park the food truck. I parked the food truck outside, and around March, April, it started warming up, and like my whole water system is like messed up. It's all jacked up. All the pipes have frozen. The whole water system. I have to, buy a whole nother, hot water system. No one ever told me that, make sure you get everything drained out. Make sure you get everything winterized, in the truck, because otherwise you go look forward to another $7,000 bill that following year.
Wow. Okay. Let me tell you something. I love Chicago. I keep saying that if I leave the Bay Area, either Chicago or DC is going to be my next step. And people say, have you been to Chicago in the winter? And I'm like, no, I've been in September. And they were like, just make sure before you make any moves, go check it out in the winter. Make sure you can hang. I
That's
know.
when post people. I had I got this dishwasher, and he came from a different part of the country, but this is his first winter in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember vividly him walking in at the door in January, just looking at me like, I can't believe you guys live like this. Like, how can you live like this? I'm like, dude, I've been living in Chicago my whole life. I'm 40-something years old. It's nothing to me, but I can understand, like, to me, it's just a way of life. But someone who have never experienced the Chicago winter, it's like eye-opening. It's like shocking.
I'm from New York originally, but even I think I have some ways to go to get with a Chicago winter. I got to get
It's
like
beautiful
y'all.
here, though.
I know
it's
it.
Beautiful. It's still one of the best cities in the country.
You are not lying. I love Chicago, and food-wise, this is one of my favorite cities. For sure. Okay. There are so many barbecue tools. Anytime I go in Home Goods, I feel like I see, a plethora of things. Some of them I'm sure are really not necessary. They're just trying to sell me something. Which 3 are non-negotiables for you to have?
Well, it depends on when you first starting off Well, I can start from the equipment you use. It depends on like the flavor. I would definitely like choose a smoker. From the smoker, I would say definitely a thermometer, and from the thermometer, what else would I? Um, I don't know. Everything is like so second nature to me that I don't even, I don't think it's just like come to me. But my other piece of equipment is I have a charcoal grill called a Mabrasa. So all these things is more like flavor and cooking meats and stuff like that. But yeah, those would be my top three. My smoker, my thermometer, and my Mabrasa.
Okay. I don't need all those mops and special spatulas and.
Oh yeah.
you know.
So so now that you mentioned that, when you when you say it like that, okay.
He's like, no, I need a few more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you gotta keep the meat moist in the smoker. So I don't mop a lot, because my smoker is a rotating smoker.
Okay.
So it's like a rotisserie. I use an oiler. But I use a spray bottle that comes in very handy. A misting spray, a really good misting spray bottle. That's what's gonna keep your meat nice and juicy. Everything you described when you came here.
Okay. See, it's simple. Buying all these, very over the top things. Just get your spray bottle.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
Spray bottle and thermometer.
Okay.
And you might need some mittens if you're not used to the heat.
Oh, you definitely need. I have some of those. The heat resistant when you go in. Yes, I got that much. Besides Chicago, what is your favorite region for barbecue?
I gotta tilt my head to Texas. I gotta say Texas. Texas, man, they doing some great things. They pushing the barbecue game to new heights. Heights that people like, man, what is going on here? You go to places like Interstellar where it's very chef driven. Things, the way I kind of want my restaurant to be. You got Leroy and Lewis. You got like so many great pit masters that's changing the idea of what barbecue can be. And it all makes sense to me.
Yeah. I'm learning more about the barbecue region in Chicago because one thing that has always been part of what y'all do here that sometimes you find in other places, sometimes you don't, is rib tips.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what did the rib tip do to y'all where people don't have it on their menu? I was so happy to come here and find that, but I knew I would find it because I'm here in Chicago.
Yeah. So rib tips is very Chicago. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and barbecue to me was a rib tip and hot link dinner.
There we go.
You got the rib tip, you got the hot links, going down to limbs, I'm going over to Best Barbecue in the hundreds. But yeah, we right here in the Midwest, Chicago used to be like the meatpacking district, here in the Midwest. So when the St. Louis cut kind of like took off, that's what they wanted, So first you got like this, you got this big spare rib, and then you cut the top part off the spare rib, you left with the rib tip, and the bottom is called the St. Louis cut. So as the St. Louis cut was getting sent to, St. Louis, we was left with the rib tips, and that's when Mr. Lim and them really took off with the rib tip, and they made that, that cut that nobody wanted to a tasty treat that, that everybody from Chicago end up, if you eat barbecue, grew up eating that. You had that.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that how a lot of our food traditions started? We got the part nobody wanted.
Yeah, we got
flipped it, flexed it.
Yep.
And next thing you know, it was in demand.
Yes, it is.
All right, then. All right. And look, I'll close this out with one question. And this is a complete selfish question. This is for my own benefit.
Okay.
One of the things I love to do when I come to different cities is get in an Uber and go ride off into a hood somewhere and find like a hole-in-the-wall place for food.
Okay.
Where can I not leave here without going?
Okay, you in Chicago, and what are some of my? So is it casual or is it like fancy?
No, I need a hole in the wall.
You need a
Usually the
hole in
ones
the
where
wall.
you can't even sit. You just like go to a window or go inside and place an order and get your food and leave.
Yeah, I would say, well, it's almost like I wouldn't say it as a hole in the wall, but you would have to check out. I'll say Llewellyn's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard of them.
Chef D'Andre,
Yes.
he killing the game.
Okay.
He is, he got some bomb fried chicken, fried fish. He do a really good mac and cheese as well.
Okay.
And yeah, all his fried foods and his shrimp and grits and all that stuff is really good. I'll tip my hat to Chef Darnell.
Okay, well, there it is, Llewellyn's. I am familiar. I've heard of them, so I'm going to have to add that to my list. I just got here yesterday, so I still got a couple of days, and I got room to play. So thank you for that tip.
Yeah, I'll give you one more because I was just at Daisy's Po' Boys yesterday, and that's always a nice treat. Depending on what side of town you're from. You're south side, Daisy Po' Boy in Hyde Park. You're on the north side. If you're not coming to Soul and Smoke for the barbecue, check out Darnell at Llewellyn's.
I was at Daisy's earlier today.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
I had the alligator.
You had the alligator?
It was very good.
Cool. I go there. I like them catfish po' boy. I had the catfish po' boy yesterday and had the shrimp po' boy.
Okay. Yeah, they got good stuff over there. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. Tell people where they can find out more about you and about Soul and Smoke.
So you can follow us on Instagram at Soul and Smoke. You can also follow us on our Facebook page. And yeah, you can go to www.soulandsmoke.com. You can find out, what's next, any new information about the food truck or, any activities we got going on.
Okay. And I saw you're selling your spice rub up front, so I'm definitely going to buy some of that before I leave here because grill season is getting started for me, and I want to start it off right.
Yeah, you got to get you a starter kit.
Okay. About to get ready, y'all. All right. Well, if y'all want to keep up with me in between episodes, you can find me at kandthebay.com or on Instagram at HeyKinthebay. That has been this week's episode of the As Told by podcast from Chicago, one of my favorite cities, y'all know. I'll see y'all on the next one.